Marriage is the furnace where you forge the tools. It's the only container strong enough to hold the power of fire or the power of sex because it's so.
Hello, and welcome to our podcast, our Pinnacle Village podcast. My name is Peace, and I'm here with Pastor Edwin today.
Hello.
And we're started this kind of a segment where we're talking about the Sunday topic that our church has been going through. And so that we can dive further into this conversation of what Jesus was teaching and what he intended, and even just open this space for our pastors to share a little bit more than the sermon, because the sermons are so limited sometimes.
Yes.
We're given 45 to an hour, and as much as we love to preach, and as much as we want to share all of the content of the message prep, which I think is one of the hardest things to do as a pastor, to reduce the sermon to just 40 minutes or 45. Like, what's the final thing? And so we have this segment so that we can explore and discuss more areas of the topic. And we're in the topic of the Beatitude, the Sermon on the Mount, actually past the Beatitude. And we're now looking at Matthew 5,
Yes.
where Jesus is giving his authority. We're coming from this Jesus sharing that he is now the fulfillment of the law, and therefore you've heard it said, and this is the series of Jesus saying, you have heard it said, but I tell you. And today we're in a very spicy topic of
Spicy.
of lust.
Lust in the heart.
Yeah. So before we begin, Pastor Edwin, how are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling spicy. No, well, it's a very spicy topic, but I feel it's also very needed, and it's something that people don't usually talk about. It's not your normal coffee table chat, but it's important because, of course, relationships are the bottom line of humanity.
Right. And I mean, it must have been important for Jesus to address it. Out of all the things in the law that Jesus could have addressed.
Yes.
Say, you've heard in the law, like 600 laws. And yet he was able to pinpoint particular ones to bring
Yes.
into the light. And for Matthew, one of the disciples, to actually record it and to write it and to put it into writing must have been pretty important.
Yep.
I believe.
Yes.
And so let me just read the verse for us, and then we can kind of dissect this however this conversation flows. So I'll just read from Matthew 5:27 to 30, when Jesus talks about adultery or the lust in the heart. So Jesus says, the ESV version, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of the members than that your whole body go into hell. And so, Pastor Edwin, do you have any just initial thoughts just to kick us off of just reacting to this?
Yes.
Maybe?
I think the important thing to note here, piece, is when Jesus started, right after the Beatitudes, he addressed the three fundamental issues that we have when we relate with one another. So the first, of course, is murder, how we extinguish the life of another person. Adultery, how we kill our relationships through what we do because of lust. And the third is divorce, how we intentionally sever ties and relationships. And of course, marriage is the fundamental, foundational relationship of civilization. So that's how we start reproducing, actually having children.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you brought out like how we relate with one another, and like sexuality is a huge part of human relationship.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we tend to avoid a little bit. We get a little bit shy, especially in the religious, in the religious field of like talking about sexuality and sex and what it means for us to engage in that in a healthy conversation in a healthy manner. So I wonder if Jesus also understood that being human has to do with understanding our hearts where it comes to how we relate with one another, and having to do with that is also how we relate with sex. Like
Yes.
how is our relationship with sex as well?
Yes. I think it's interesting that you brought that up because if we remember in the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 3, the first thing that Adam and Eve did when they sinned was they realized they were naked, and then they got fig leaves and covered themselves up. It means that when humanity fell into sin, shame also came in. The reason I feel why we don't really discuss the topics of sex and lust is because we feel it's something to be ashamed of. Maybe because we have not really met the standard of God when it comes to sexuality. Or maybe because we just don't know how to go about talking about this very important topic.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. I feel like shame
Yeah.
is a big part of that, and growing up, you're not taught these things even
Yep.
from your parents,
Yes.
especially in a Eastern kind of culture as I was raised.
Being Asian, yes.
Yeah, I think that's big. I don't think I've ever got the talk. maybe like 15 minutes cap of
Yes.
don't do it. And then it's not like explaining what it is. It was more like don't do it.
Yes.
Stay away from that. And yet we being creatures of curiosity can't help but like what and so a lot of times like you learn from friends, you learn from like peers, you learn from camps.
Today we learn it online.
Yeah, and especially
Social
today.
media.
Yeah. Actually, I have this really, really powerful quote it's from a book I read called Unwanted, and it kind of addresses the unhealthy sexual behaviors that as Christians that we face. And it definitely talks about shame. And he says, we live in a day where we have never been so lonely and at the same time had such access to pornography. And I have to believe that the evil one has schemed for this association.
Yep.
Like we live in the most loneliest times of our lives. And I think pandemic definitely reveal that. And at the same time, we have so much access to all these sources where I don't know, like even me, this is a little bit of a story. Like you didn't have that kind of access. Like you didn't have internet at the tip of your fingers. It was usually always at the family computer in the living room. So you just couldn't do it.
Yep.
Just, even if you wanted to, if you're curious, you just couldn't do it. But now that it's accessible anywhere, and kids at the age of 10 have smartphones, and
Yes.
you just don't know. Yes. So I just want us to dive into the scripture and Jesus saying, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you. So where do you feel Jesus is coming from when he's addressing lustful intent? When he says, even if you look at a woman lustfully, that's already sin. That's already breaking the law. And maybe we can just start there.
Yeah. Because when Jesus was addressing the ancient Jews, the Jews of his day, they believed that as long as you don't engage in the act of adultery, it's okay. But here, Jesus was addressing the heart of the issue, which the basic bottom line is, lust is the first step in a slippery slope. So an adultery is just the last step. It's it's the result. In James chapter 1, James was talking about how sin is conceived and then it gives birth to death. So the death of the relationship, the marriage, happens, of course, when you commit adultery. In fact, that's the only exception, or that's the only reason why God will allow divorce to happen if one partner commits sexual immorality, adultery, unfaithfulness. And so Jesus is here saying lust is such a big deal that it can start uh, from inside your heart, and eventually, like cancer, it will spread, it will grow until it eventually takes over your whole life until you're really dead, spiritually dead, and your relationships are dead. So um, he is really telling them, he was addressing the self-righteous behavior of the hypocritical people who were saying, I'm okay as long as I'm not doing it. But actually, inside, they are already lusting in their hearts. So he was telling them it's the same thing because it has essentially the same result.
Yeah. But would you kind of like bring it into our culture today? Like not everyone is sleeping around, let's say. But would it be the equivalent of like watching things online where it starts with the lust? And what would you say would be the detriment of having lust in your heart? Even if I don't actually go
Yeah.
out and, do the act,
Yes.
what would be the danger?
Because what you feed your mind, what you put into your heart, will eventually be what your life practices. So there's this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, if I'm not mistaken. You plant a thought, you reap an action. Plant an action, you reap a habit. Plant a habit, and you reap a destiny. So what the way you think will eventually determine how you act, and the habits that you form. You reap. You plant a habit, reap a character. That's it. There you go. And then you plant a character, you reap your destiny. You will come to a point wherein your character is so set that you will just do things naturally. You will do things without even thinking, because that's you've already been set. That's why you see rapists, for example. They don't start as rapists. They start with lust, of course, until finally their conscience is so calloused and so seared that they become sociopaths. So a sociopath basically is a person who doesn't feel what other people feel. They're incapable of empathy. So all he thinks about is just to satisfy his lusts, until finally he just cannot contain it anymore. He acts on it, even if it means he will force himself on other women, or on women, or other people for that matter. So it's really dangerous because, again, compared to it, we compare it to a disease like cancer, for example. It's there, and it's gonna increase. It's going to eat you from the inside out.
Yeah. I mean, it's everything will start small.
Yep.
And how would you? I just want to push the envelope a little
Yeah.
and just be like, but it's manageable. I'm only using this to relieve my stress. I'm not really out there. I don't have the intention of harming people through my lust. This is just for my pleasure. This is just, a bad day. This is it's just a tool for me. How would you want to explain the gospel and the truth of what Jesus is trying to get at?
Yes, the problem with that is it's addictive. So whatever you practice will eventually, again, become your habit. And the problem with that is when you engage in sexual activity, your body produces chemicals which are actually very very pleasing. But the problem is it's going to make you addicted to it. So if it's not in the right place, it's not gonna bring you into somewhere you want to go.
Yeah, and then like any addiction,
Yep.
whether that's drugs, whether
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
gambling, it's gonna
Drinking.
eventually it's gonna consume you. It's gonna take
Yes.
over your life.
And so you don't really have control. You don't really You can't really control an addiction. So when you say, I don't think it's harmful, but without you noticing it, you actually become numb. Your heart becomes calloused. Your mind doesn't notice um, how bad it's become. I lived in Europe for 10 years, 2003 to about 2013, and there you see how distorted, how sick people can become because they're not stimulated by these images anymore. So they have to keep on making it more and more intense, more and more gross, just to stimulate something because you're no longer being satisfied by the things that used to satisfy you. Again, it's like a drug. So you need more and more drugs so that you will get that high.
Yeah.
And it's the same with lust. And the problem with that is once you do find someone that you need to connect with on a deeper level emotionally, you're no longer capable of giving yourself to that person because now you see that person as an object to use, no longer as a person to love. And that's really the problem because sex is meant to be shared with the person that you are in covenant with. So when I was preaching on this topic, we talked about the chemicals oxytocin and vasopressin. So these are the chemicals your body produces when you engage in sexual activity. These are called the bonding chemicals. So it's meant to tell your soul, your spirit, and your body, you belong to each other. So the more you engage in sex as a couple, as a married couple, the stronger your marriage will be. In fact, one of the indications for you to know if your marriage is strong, you ask any married couple, it's your sex life is healthy. In fact, those who have been together for decades, maybe even 50 years, and say that they still love each other deeply, chances are they're still having sex. Why? Because that's the design of God for sex. It's meant to bond you and your wife, you and your husband, so that the bond that you began when you said I do to each other is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger each day. It's like adding one layer of cement on top of the other, and eventually you have a bedrock of strength because you're really literally bonded on the chemical level. Problem is, if you do it outside of marriage without a commitment and the relationship is broken, for example, you do it with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and then you break up, you are devastated. That's the reason why people who break up with a partner and they've had sex already, it doesn't just it isn't just painful on the emotional level. Some of them literally feel pain.
Physical pain.
Yeah, physical pain. Some of them have palpitations in the heart, high blood pressure. Some of them suffer from chemical imbalance. It's because your body is telling you what you built, what you strengthened in this relationship should not be destroyed. Literally, your body is talking to you that you're doing something wrong. You're actually stabbing yourself. And of course, that's the reason why when Jesus said, do not engage in sexual immorality, meaning when you're in a covenant relationship, don't have sex outside. But it also means if there is no covenant relationship, you should not engage in it. Because the purpose of sex is really that, to bond two people. So the problem with that, again, if you're a person who sleeps around, so you bond and then you disengage, you bond and then you disengage, you bond and then you disengage. The tendency is you look at women or men as objects for you to use for your sexual pleasure. You no longer see them as persons who are made in the image of God that you need to love, you need to care for. And when you do eventually, the problem with that is when you eventually do decide to get married, then you are no longer capable of determining whether this person should is a person that you should bond with because you're so just used to bonding and then disengaging. It's like Velcro.
The more
Yeah, the more
you
you
use it.
attach, maybe do it 1,000 times, it won't attach anymore. When the time comes you need to put it together, it won't. It's not capable anymore, and that's the reason why you have so many trust issues among married people. That's the reason why they don't find sex satisfying anymore because they've been exposed to so much trash outside, and they've been so destroyed on the inside. Once they do get married, the sad reality is what your partner gets are damaged goods. So that's the reason why Christ telling us you have to preserve yourself for the partner that I have prepared for you.
Yeah.
And the same way you also want that for the partner, for your partner to preserve himself or herself for the time that you will be together.
Yeah. And I'm sure like Jesus here is addressing all crowds. And I don't know. I don't know the demographic, but they would be singles there.
Oh, of course,
as well,
definitely, yes.
And married couples. And so he's addressing both crowds.
Yes.
So married and the single. And so I want to, like, it's great that I appreciate, like, you brought up the purpose of sex because we are sexual people. Like, we are designed to have sex,
Yes.
and sex is
God is not against sex.
yeah. And I think that's something that we need to hear.
Yeah.
It's just that there's this distortion of sex.
Yes.
And it's so easy to manipulate it
Yep.
because we're so geared.
For our own agenda. Yeah.
We're so geared. Like, it's a topic that we just gravitate towards because
Yes.
we're. Would you say, would it be the lack of the conversation and the topic, or would it just be we are designed, we are created in the image of God to have
Yes.
a healthy relationship through sex?
Yeah.
Would it be both?
Yeah, I think it's both. And I think just going back to that, what I mentioned earlier, Jesus is not against sex. In fact, he is for sex when he said this. Because when he said, do not commit adultery, it was an injunction to protect the sexual integrity and sexual purity of the marriage bed.
Right.
So if you are a person who has been victimized by betrayal, if you come from a broken home like myself, if you've experienced broken relationships in the family because of adultery and unfaithfulness, you know what Jesus is referring to here. He is protecting people from being devastated by adultery. And he was saying, sex between a couple must be guarded. The relationship of husband and wife must be guarded because that is God's design for the sexual union. Sex outside of that will destroy the union. So we can compare sex to fire, for example. Fire has so much power, and it has the power to do good things and the power, of course, to do bad things. Here in LA, we just had the wildfires that destroyed homes, thousands of homes. So we know the devastation that fire can bring. But we also, of course, use fire every day. We use fire to cook our delicious food. We use fire to forge metal, make tools, make weapons. I'm a martial artist, that's why I watch Forged in Fire.
Great show.
Great show, right? We use fire to warm ourselves. We just finished winters. Of course, we're now in spring. When it's in the right container, when it's in a fireplace in the home, it brings warmth. It brings comfort. It brings nice and beautiful things. But if it's outside the fireplace and it gets to your curtains and the roof and the fire burns and the house burns down, it's not a nice thing. Marriage is the fireplace. Marriage is the gas stove. Marriage is the furnace where you forge the tools. It's the only container strong enough to hold the power of fire or the power of sex because it's so powerful. In fact, that's the reason why Jesus said, if you do not cut off your right hand, gouge out your right eye. Sex is so powerful actually that when you look at a sex addict, for example, sorry, oops, a sex addict thinks of nothing else but just to satisfy his or her lust for the moment. The person doesn't care. Does it with anyone or anything, sometimes even with an animal. So the person is just so obsessed and so concerned, so consumed with satisfying the fleshly desires. He doesn't think of anything else but that. So much less to think about the person's eternal future. Jesus is here saying, sex can, or lust rather, lust can overwhelm you so much that you think that there is nothing more important than satisfying your sexual desire, your body's desire, that you don't think about eternity.
Yeah.
It can literally drag you to hell.
Yeah. Which is
Which is what
said.
his point. Then for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And that's where you see it, of course. So many people spend a lifetime just trying to pursue this. Of course, you know that the porn industry is,
Yeah,
I
actually,
think it's a $97 billion industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
It creates more traffic than Netflix, Amazon, Twitter combined.
Yeah.
It's
That's right.
It's insane.
It's crazy, and that's why whole populations of people spend their whole life trying to pursue lust and gratifying the lusts of the flesh without even thinking, all of this world, we will have to say goodbye. We will have to leave this world one day, and we will have to face the judge, God himself, and he will ask us, what did you do with the life I gave you? What did you do with the people I gave you to take care of? And so that's what lust can do. It has the capacity to destroy your marriage, destroy your children, destroy your family. In fact, if you are a Christian and you have children, but you struggle with lust and you don't really have this kind of conviction and it's not under control, you won't be able to pass your faith to your children because you're so busy trying to gratify your lust or even battling with it and losing. So you're really wasting your time. And that's how important this topic is. It goes far beyond the surface, and of course Jesus Christ addresses the heart.
Yeah, there's so much thing you said. I just want to go back to it and just kind of reemphasize a little bit that God is. We tend to forget what God is for through all the things that He tells us to avoid.
Yes.
And I think that's something important. Like He's not saying no to sex. He's saying He created sex for good. Just know its boundaries.
Yes.
And within its boundaries, it can be more beautiful.
Of course.
It can be more exciting. It can be more satisfying than outside of it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because everything that's good must have boundaries. It must, right? So for you to have a good relationship with your wife, of course, that your relationship must have boundaries. And that this is one of them, of course. Exclusive sexual relationship. When you go beyond those boundaries, it destroys the whole relationship. We do that with everything. Everything has boundaries. Properties have boundaries. Again, your fireplace has boundaries, so the fire can only go as far. Paintings have boundaries, for example. So that's why we frame them. This is the boundary of my painting. Because if you start painting outside, you start painting painting the faces of the people, then I think that's not good. Right? You start painting at the walls, you start painting at the food in the kitchen. I don't think that's good.
And it's funny because children do that.
Yeah.
Who don't understand.
They don't understand boundaries, right? But if you have something and then you put boundaries there, then you appreciate its beauty. And that's what boundaries are for.
Yes, Paul.
Yes.
Yeah, and then another great like you got into when Jesus said cut it off, like gouge out the eye, because it's so powerful that he can consume you. It's powerful enough, like before you realize it, wow, I'm so deep into this. And you also brought up lust, everything boils down to the self. And can you talk a little bit more about that where is this drive coming from? Where is this hunger coming from to satisfy myself, like satisfy and just seek pleasure? Where could, and you did touch upon it, that it's the self. Eventually it boils down to you wanting something no matter what. Like you don't care about the cost, you don't care about the repercussion, you don't care about who it hurts and who might it affect. Can you just talk a little bit more about that and just kind of address the human heart in nature as well? Like, are we just selfish people?
Yes, we are.
And that's true. And,
Yes.
And maybe even just bring into light of the gospel, and where does the gospel shift that heart that is so selfish? Like, I just want sex because, and even like pornography use, I think I read somewhere that it's one of the most selfish things, because you don't need to talk to anyone.
Yep.
You don't need to encounter a conversation. You just turn on a website.
It's
and
a
you
quick
just,
fix.
and you meet your needs right away. There's no, hey, can I ask you on a date? Can I marry you?
Yeah.
Can I spend
No commitment.
No commitment. Absolutely. It's like no commitment at all. Like, let me just get what I want.
Yep.
And just go about it. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? The condition of the human heart. Why do you think we're so selfish? And where is Jesus coming from when he addresses this?
Yeah. Of course, because it's interesting. Martin Luther, the great reformer, the great German reformer, had this Latin phrase describing the human heart: incurvatus in se. Literally means the heart is curved in on itself. Meaning everything we do ends up benefiting our personal agenda. For example, here, when we have this podcast, I want to help people. I'm talking about how to avoid lust, but the pitfall is I might be doing it to exalt myself. Oh, he's so smart.
Yeah.
Oh, he's so spiritual. Right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the human heart.
Yeah, can't help it.
Yeah, you can't help
Yeah.
it. That's a problem. So another example
All the time.
is you're a very responsible parent. You want your children to succeed. You want them to do good in school. But behind that, you want to use them to affirm yourself, to find your worth in them, and to have the reputation of being someone who raised good kids because you're insecure.
Whew.
So that's really the problem of the human heart. And of course, sex and lust, which destroys sex, is no exception. We just want to satisfy ourselves, and as you said, it is very selfish because you don't have to do the hard work of relationship. You just get it. And for those of you who are married, you understand what I'm saying. Sex doesn't happen the moment you want it to happen and you tell your wife, let's have sex. No, you have to learn first to understand her love language. Say good morning. Serve her in the house. Ask her how her day went. Listen to her when she's going through anxiety, when she wants to share something, share a problem. Go up, take care of her needs. Think of her family, for example, and take care of the people that she loves. In other words, relationships must be considered, and sex, of course, is just another part of that. That's not the end goal.
Yeah.
The end goal really is to become a more loving, considerate, and unselfish person. In fact, again, if I may say this, even in the sexual act itself, you need to serve each other. So many So-called sex experts are teaching couples how to have wonderful sex, but they forget that even the sex act itself is being considerate of the partner that you have. You'd be surprised how couples engage. Because I know this because number one, I'm married. Number two, I handle couples groups. You'd be surprised how you have couples who have children already, and yet they complain about their sex life because, for example, the woman just says, "All my husband does is he has, we just have sex, but he never really asks me how I feel."
Yeah. So it's like more it's like even in marriage, it's
Exactly.
self-serving.
It's because it was started by a perverted understanding of sex, probably through pornography, probably through your friends, and seeing women as objects that you use. So, in other words, this is more prevalent among men. Men just use women, even their wife, to have an orgasm, but not thinking, is my wife also being satisfied? Why? Because they never really talk. In other words, all the man is thinking about is sex, but he never really considered the humanity, the personhood of his wife. You'd be surprised how a lot of women actually complain about that.
Yeah.
Even if they're married, even Christians have this issue. So this is really a very spicy.
Yeah. I was gonna say we're like, okay, we're diving in deep.
But I mean, this is something I don't have time anymore to address in the pulpit.
Right. Yes.
But this is something I feel must be talked about. Men, because they're so used in being selfish. And because there's so much shame with this topic of lust and sex.
Yeah, yeah.
Even in the sex act, they don't understand. The reason why your wife actually is not that excited in having sex, it's because you've been treating her like trash.
Or just like an
You're
object.
not considering what she thinks. You're talking harshly. You're not doing your responsibility as a spiritual leader of the home. There's something not right. And so the reason why lust is bad, and pornography in particular, is because you get the sensation of sex without understanding that that's just the cherry on top. But the whole cake is really the relationship. How you become as a human. How you become more like Christ by serving one another. How you pursue a calling together. And then you just renew and recommit yourselves to each other, verbally, of course, through your words, emotionally, of course, through showing love to each other, and then physically by having sex.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about couples, and I can speak for like the singles that I engage with, and you be. I mean, it's not a surprise, but it's a lot of times like we talk about marriage, we talk about relationship. Again, it's self-seeking. I want to seek marriage to satisfy my loneliness.
Exactly.
I want to find a girlfriend. I want to find a boyfriend because everyone else is doing it. It's hardly about. We don't ask the questions like, who can I serve, right? In
Yes.
marriage, like who can I give myself to? That's, again, I guess going back to and addressing the human heart. Like we're just so selfish. Like we're so self-seeking that even in the beauty of marriage that God gave, it's a gift. And yet even in that gift, we twist it so that it's self-serving. Like I want to get married so I can have sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really about.
Oh, man.
Right? Even that, and that's only the first step of sex too. That God created to make children, be
Yes.
fruitful and multiply.
And by the way, that's the reason why, because I might miss this. That's the reason why the end product of sex, one of the end products, of course, is having children.
Yeah,
Because the idea behind having children is you love each other so much that you are serving one another, and that this union is strong as shown by the sexual union, that you are now ready to start taking care of another human being. So with all this debate about abortion and everything, I know this is not our
Yeah.
topic, but that even that issue itself will be addressed if there is a proper understanding of what sex is for and the end result of having children. It's not just the biological product of a sperm fertilizing an egg. It's really the union of two people who are saying, I serve you, I have committed my life to you in a covenant of marriage, and by the grace of God, He has gifted us with a child, and now we are able, by the grace of God, to enjoy this gift of having children.
Yeah.
And that's what a family is all about. I think we forget that because we have relegated sex into an act to satisfy our lust.
Yeah, and it's a spiritual war.
Yeah.
It's a cultural war that turns it on its head.
Yes.
And just enjoy it. It's in media. It's everywhere.
Yep.
And you grow up watching and listening to it, and you just think that's what it is. Well, no one is gonna talk to me about this, and what I see.
So you
is,
learn.
Yeah. Naturally, this is what I am seeing, and
Oh,
this is
man.
kind of what I believe, and I'm gonna. And no one seems to correct me, and and I'm a little bit ashamed to bring this out. So this is kind of
Yeah. And the problem
the
with
world
that
is.
also is that's actually marketing, because of course we know that sex sells.
Yeah.
And so what you actually watch and see in all these posts, social media it's all driven by money. And so if you want something to be destroyed, put money in it. We know that, right? That's why I like what the Beatles said. You can't buy me love. The things that are truly important in this life are things that money cannot buy. So that's the reason why we should not learn sex from all these external things, and of course we should learn it from God Himself in His Word.